Indianapolis, Indiana. February 1993. The Indiana Youth Center wasn't built for comfort. Its concrete walls absorbed sound like they absorb hope, slowly, completely, without mercy. In Cell Block F, the fluorescent lights hummed their mechanical song, casting harsh shadows across floors polished by decades of institutional routine. Mike Tyson, the former undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, sat on the edge of his narrow bunk, his hands clasped together, staring at nothing in particular. He'd been inside for 9 months. 9 months of counting ceiling tiles. 9 months of listening to steel doors slam. 9 months of becoming something other than what the world remembered. But prison doesn't care about titles. It doesn't care about legacy. In here, reputation is rebuilt one day at a time, tested in ways the boxing ring never prepared anyone for. Tyson had kept to himself mostly. He read books on philosophy, on history, on religion. He studied. He reflected. The rage that once made him the most feared man in boxing had begun to transform into something else. Something quieter. Something more dangerous in its stillness. The other inmates noticed. They always notice. In prison, silence speaks louder than words, and Tyson's silence had become a language all its own. But there was one man who didn't understand that language. His name was Lorenzo Mitchell. 6'3". 230 pounds of muscle earned not in training camps but in prison yards across 3 different facilities. Mitchell had a reputation too, one built on violence, on dominance, on the kind of street credibility that made men step aside when he walked past. He'd done 7 years already, had another 5 to go, and in that time he'd established himself as someone you didn't challenge. Someone you didn't disrespect. Mitchell had watched Tyson for months. Watched him read. Watched him pray. Watched him become soft, in Mitchell's estimation. The champ who once destroyed men in 90 seconds was now quoting philosophers and avoiding confrontation. To Mitchell, this wasn't growth. This was weakness. And weakness, in his world, demanded exploitation. The air grows heavy with unspoken tension. It started small, as these things always do. Comments in the chow line. Shoulder bumps in the corridor. Little provocations designed to test boundaries, to see where the line was drawn. Tyson ignored them. He'd learned, through therapy and introspection, that not every challenge deserved a response. That strength could also mean walking away. That the most powerful thing he could do was nothing at all. But Mitchell interpreted this differently. On the evening of February 18th, during recreational hour in the common area, Mitchell made his move. The room was filled with maybe 30 inmates, some playing cards, others watching a grainy television mounted high on the wall, a few lifting makeshift weights fashioned from materials that would make professional trainers weep. Tyson sat alone in the corner, a book open in his lap. The autobiography of Malcolm X. He'd read it 3 times already, but each time he found something new, some passage that spoke to where he was now rather than where he'd been. Mitchell approached with 2 of his associates flanking him. The room didn't go silent, that would be too obvious, too theatrical. But the quality of noise changed. Conversations continued, but at a lower volume. Eyes stayed on cards or television screens, but peripheral vision expanded. Everyone was suddenly aware of everything. "Yo, champ." Mitchell's voice carried that particular tone, mockery wrapped in false respect. "What you reading? Bedtime stories?" Tyson looked up slowly. His eyes, which once burned with volcanic intensity before fights, were calm. Almost sad. He marked his place in the book with his thumb. "Just learning," he said quietly. "Trying to be better than I was." Mitchell laughed, not with genuine amusement, but with that performative aggression that announces itself to an audience. "Better than you was. Shit, you were something. Now you just another convict reading books, acting all spiritual and shit. Where's that killer who used to eat people's children? Where's Iron Mike?" Time slows to a crawl. Every breath becomes audible. Tyson closed the book gently and set it beside him. He stood up, and even though Mitchell was slightly taller, something about Tyson's presence made the room feel smaller. "That person," Tyson said, his voice barely above a whisper, "that person did a lot of damage. To others. To himself. I'm trying not to be that person anymore. Trying not to be that person. Mitchell stepped closer, emboldened by Tyson's restraint. Man, you soft now. All that meditation and reading done made you pussy. The Mike Tyson I heard about would have laid me out by now. But you. He poked Tyson's chest with his index finger. You ain't got it no more. The guards stationed at the entrance of the common area shifted their weight. One of them, Officer Daniels, a 20-year veteran who'd seen every variation of prison violence, put his hand near his radio. He knew what men looked like before they exploded. He'd seen that look hundreds of times. But Tyson didn't explode. He looked down at the finger pressed against his chest, then back up at Mitchell. I don't want trouble, he said simply. Mitchell misread this completely. He turned to his associates, arms spread wide in theatrical disbelief. You're hearing this? The baddest man on the planet don't want trouble. He turned back to Tyson, his face now inches away. What if trouble wants you, champ? What if I'm tired of watching you sit here like you better than everybody? Like you some kind of changed man? You the same as us, homie. Same cage. Same bars. Same shit. Every eye in the room locked on the two men. What happened next would be recounted in whispers for years afterward, would become the stuff of prison legend, would be told and retold until the details blurred into mythology. But here is what actually occurred, stripped of embellishment, presented exactly as it unfolded. Tyson took a single step backward, creating distance. His hands remained at his sides. This is your last chance to walk away, he said, and something in his tone, some frequency that existed beneath the words themselves, made two inmates on the far side of the room stand up and move toward the exit. They didn't know what was coming, but some primal part of their brains recognized a warning. Mitchell didn't. My last chance. He laughed again, that same performative sound. Nigger, what you gonna? He never finished the sentence. Mitchell threw a wild right hook, telegraphed by his shoulder, powered by arrogance rather than technique. It was the kind of punch that might work in a bar fight or a prison yard brawl. Heavy, committed, meant to end things quickly. But Mike Tyson had spent his entire life seeing punches like this. Had dodged, slipped, and countered combinations thrown by world champions whose hands were faster than thought. Mitchell's punch, in comparison, moved through molasses. Tyson didn't slip it so much as simply wasn't there when it arrived. He moved his head 3 inches to the left, just 3 inches, and Mitchell's fist sailed past, carrying its owner off balance. And in that moment, that fraction of a second when Mitchell was extended, vulnerable, still committed to the momentum of his miss, Tyson's entire body engaged. It wasn't the 6-punch combinations that destroyed Trevor Berbick. It wasn't the uppercut that sent Larry Holmes into retirement. It was a single left hook to the body, thrown from a distance of perhaps 8 inches, landing with surgical precision on Mitchell's liver. The sound echoed like a baseball bat hitting a heavy bag. Mitchell's eyes went wide, not with fear, not with pain yet, but with the sudden biological understanding that something catastrophic had just occurred inside his body. The liver shot, when properly executed, doesn't just hurt. It hijacks the nervous system. It sends a message that bypasses the brain entirely, goes straight to every cell in the body, and says, shut down. Now. Mitchell's legs didn't give out immediately. There was a moment, perhaps 2 seconds, where he stood completely still, mouth open, hands frozen in mid-air where they'd been after his missed punch. His face went through a series of rapid transformations. Confusion, then recognition, then a kind of pale, sweating terror as the pain arrived. Then he dropped. Not backward. Not dramatically. He folded, like someone had removed every bone in his body simultaneously. He went to his knees first, then forward onto his hands, then completely onto his side in a fetal position. And then he vomited, the automatic response when the liver is traumatized, the body trying to expel something that isn't actually there. The entire sequence, from Mitchell's punch to his collapse, lasted approximately 3 seconds. Silence consumed the room like a living thing. Tyson stood over Mitchell for a moment, looking down at the writhing figure with something that might have been pity. Then he stepped back, picked up his book, and sat down in the exact same spot he'd occupied before. He opened to his mark page. His hands, observers would later swear, weren't even shaking. Mitchell's two associates stood frozen, caught between the instinct to help their friend and the very rational calculation that whatever happened to Mitchell could just as easily happen to them. Officer Daniels finally moved, rushing forward with his radio now in hand, calling for medical assistance. Other guards flooded in. But Tyson didn't move. He sat reading his book while chaos erupted around him. Mitchell would spend 2 days in the prison infirmary. The punch had caused significant bruising to his liver, not permanent damage, but enough to make every breath painful for a week. More significantly, it had caused irreparable damage to his reputation. In the prison hierarchy, being destroyed by a single body shot while your opponent remained seated reading a book afterward was a humiliation that couldn't be recovered from. A legend is born in the space between violence and restraint. The official report stated that Mitchell had initiated an assault and that Tyson had defended himself with appropriate force. Appropriate. That word would become darkly humorous among the inmates who'd witnessed it. There was nothing appropriate about what they'd seen. They'd witnessed the difference between a man who fights and a man who's mastered the art of controlled devastation. But here's what the report didn't say. Here's what the newspapers never printed. Here's the truth that remained hidden until now. After Mitchell was carried out, after the common area was locked down and inmates returned to their cells, Officer Daniels approached Tyson. Daniels was the kind of guard who'd seen it all: race riots, murder attempts, suicides. Nothing moved him anymore. But he stood at Tyson's cell door for a long moment before speaking. "You could have killed him," Daniels said quietly. "That punch. I've seen you fight on TV. That wasn't even close to full power, was it?" Tyson looked up from his book. "No, sir, it wasn't." "Why?" Tyson considered the question. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that had nothing to do with volume. "Because the old me would have. The old me would have hit him until the guards pulled me off. Would have let that rage take over. Would have given them exactly what they expected." He paused. "I'm trying to prove something to myself, officer. Not to him. Not to anyone else. To myself. That I can be more than what I was." Daniels nodded slowly. "For what it's worth," he said, "I think you succeeded. Respect is earned in moments of restraint, not excess." In the weeks that followed, something shifted in cell block F. Inmates who'd previously tested Tyson, who'd seen his transformation as weakness, now understood it differently. They'd witnessed something rare, a man who possessed the capacity for overwhelming violence but chose not to deploy it. Not out of fear. Not out of inability. But out of conscious choice. Mitchell, once released from the infirmary, never approached Tyson again. In fact, he requested a transfer to a different cell block, citing personal safety concerns. The request was granted. In the strange economy of prison respect, Mitchell had been given a gift. Tyson had pulled his punch enough to hurt but not destroy, to teach but not kill. Others might not be so fortunate. Tyson served the remainder of his sentence quietly. He continued reading, continued studying, continued the internal work that prison had forced upon him. Years later, in interviews after his release, he would occasionally reference his time inside, the books he read, the lessons he learned, the person he became. But he never mentioned Mitchell. Never mentioned that night in the common area. Never mentioned the 3 seconds that redefined what strength meant. Some stories don't need to be told to everyone. Some truths exist in the spaces between headlines, in the moments that cameras don't capture, in the decisions made when no one's counting, when there's no belt on the line, no purse to win, no glory to gain. The most powerful punch is the one you choose not to throw. In 1995, when Tyson was released from prison, the world expected to see the destroyer return. And in some ways, he did. He would win the heavyweight championship again, would have his moments of brilliance and chaos, would continue the complicated, public unraveling and rebuilding of his life. But for those who were there that night in February 1993, who saw what happened in the common area of cell block F, who witnessed the difference between the fighter who entered prison and the man who existed within it, they knew something the world didn't. Mike Tyson's most devastating knockout didn't happen in the ring. It happened in a moment when he proved he could destroy someone with less than 5% of his power, then choose to sit down and keep reading his book. It happened when he demonstrated that the scariest thing about him wasn't his ability to hurt people, it was his newfound ability not to, even when provoked. Lorenzo Mitchell learned what many men before him had failed to understand. There is a universe of difference between a man who doesn't fight because he can't and a man who doesn't fight because he's transcended the need to prove anything. Prison taught Mike Tyson many things. It taught him patience. It taught him humility. It taught him that transformation is possible, though never easy. But perhaps the most important lesson it taught him was this: the strongest cage isn't made of steel bars, it's made of the limitations we place on ourselves, the stories we tell about who we must be, the identities we cling to because we're afraid of who we might become without them. That night, Tyson opened the door of his cage. Not the physical one, that would take 2 more years. But the internal one, the prison of expectation and reputation and anger that had defined him since childhood. Transformation happens in silence, witnessed only by those brave enough to look. And that's how legends are forged in moments the world never sees. Not in the flash of cameras or the roar of crowds, but in the quiet decision to be more than what circumstances demand, to choose restraint over release, to prove that the most dangerous man isn't the one who can't control his power, it's the one who can, but simply chooses a different path. The Indiana Youth Center still stands today. Cell Block F has housed thousands of inmates since 1993. The common area has seen countless confrontations, fights, and moments of violence. But those who were there that night, who saw what happened when Mike Tyson was pushed to his limit and responded with precision rather than fury, they carry a different story. A hidden truth. A shocking revelation about what strength actually means. Mitchell served the remainder of his sentence and was released in 1998. He never returned to prison, a statistical anomaly for someone with his record. In rare conversations about his past, he would sometimes reference a moment that changed my perspective, but never elaborate. He understood, perhaps, that some lessons are too profound, too personal, too transformative to be reduced to anecdotes. Officer Daniels retired in 2002. He kept a journal throughout his career, documenting significant incidents. The entry for February 18, 1993, is longer than any other. It concludes with a single sentence: "Witness the difference between violence and discipline today. We'll never forget the control it takes to destroy someone and choose not to." As for Mike Tyson, he would go on to have one of the most scrutinized second acts in sports history. His life after prison was filled with triumphs and disasters, reinventions and relapses, wisdom and chaos. But for one night, in a place the world forgot about, he won a fight more important than any championship, the fight against becoming the worst version of himself. The greatest victories happen when no one's keeping score. And that's the shocking truth about what happened in Mike Tyson's prison cell fight. Except it wasn't in a cell. It was in a common area. And it wasn't really a fight. It was a 3-second demonstration of what separates legends from ordinary men. Not the ability to hurt. The wisdom to choose. And that's how legends are forged in moments the world never sees.